moderator of tonight's discussion, Dr. James Braxton Peterson, is the Director of Africana Studies and Associate Professor of English at Lehigh University and an MSNBC contributor. Dr. Peterson is also the founder of Hip Hop Scholars Incorporated, an association of hip-hop generational scholars dedicated to researching and developing the cultural and educational potential of hip-hop, urban, and youth cultures. He is currently working on his first academic book, focusing on mortality and commercial culture in the hip-hop world. Dr. Angela Davis is an author, educator, and activist who first achieved fame in the 1960s as a prominent outspoken activist on issues related to social justice and equality. The author of 8 books and a sought-after lecturer, she has spent the past 15 years at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she is now Distinguished Professor Emerita of History of Consciousness and Interdisciplinary PhD Program and Feminist Studies. Dr. Davis is a founding member of Critical Resistance, a national organization dedicated to the dismantling of the prison industrial complex. Internationally, she is affiliated with Sisters Inside, an abolitionist organization based on Queens Island, Australia, that works in solidarity with women in prison. Dr. Davis's work in recent years has focused on the range of social problems associated with incarceration and communities most affected by poverty and racial discrimination. Her most recent books are Abolition, Democracy, and Are Prisons Obsolete?, about the abolition of the prison industrial complex, and a new edition of the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Ranked among the greatest hip-hop artists of all time by MTV, The Source, and other outlets, Nas has enjoyed a successful career that has spanned over 2 decades and 10 studio albums, 6 of which have topped the Billboard 200 in the United States. To date, he has sold over 25 million records worldwide and received 11 Grammy nominations. His most recent album, 2012's Life is Good, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. On April 15th, Nas will receive a special 20th anniversary edition of his critically acclaimed album, Illmatic, which will feature several rare and unreleased demos and remixes to commemorate the occasion. A native of Queens, New York, Nas's music blends commentary on socioeconomic issues with poignant references to race, African culture, religion, politics, and more. His work has crossed into the academy as well. In 2013, the Hip Hop Archive and Research Institute at Harvard University's Hutchins Center established the Nasir Jones Hip Hop Fellowship, a fund for artists and scholars whose work is related to hip hop. He also recently announced a new television series, Street Dreams, a biographical drama that will recount the trials and tribulations of Nas as he worked to establish himself in the music industry in the 1990s. Nas has been an avid supporter of UNICEF, working to raise funds for the Horn of Africa region in East Africa. He also donated all proceeds of Distant Relatives in his 2010 collaboration with Damian Marley to help end poverty in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. James Peterson, Dr. Angela Davis,
I just first of all want to thank you both for joining us here for this conversation this evening. Thank you so much.
This is my second time.
This is your second time
in the last 2 months. I was here on January 16th.
And the weather just wiped us out.
The university shut down.
Yes. We have a lot better weather today. So we're going to do a couple things. We have a short time to talk amongst ourselves, and then we're going to open this up and take some questions. Obviously, the topic of the day is mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex. And I should just say right from the top that you may see me use those terms interchangeably. but I probably should, right? Mass incarceration is the practice of incarcerating large amounts of American citizens here, mostly people of color, mostly poor folk, people who have substance abuse challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And the prison industrial complex is actually the entity that conducts mass incarceration. And so it's a partnership between our government and private corporations that incentivize some private institutions and some government facilities to incarcerate more and more people. So although I'll use them interchangeably, we probably should at least make the distinction from the start. Both of you are familiar with the data, almost 2 million people incarcerated. You could put about 4 or 5 cities together, and that might equal the number of Americans that we incarcerate on a regular basis. The system continues to grow. Somewhere between 50 and 75,000 people are incarcerated every year. Like I said earlier, most of those folk are people with substance abuse problems. About 70% of them are illiterate. Almost all of them are poor. The recidivism rate, the rate at which people return to the system once they get out, in some places as high as 2/3. When we look at that total population number, some 40% are black and brown folk. Professor Davis might disagree. It may be higher than that.
Well, if you include jails, then the number is closer to 2.5 million.
Right.
And you have
And the percentages.
disproportionately large number of people of color in jails.
So those are the, that's the data, and that is what we're here to talk about tonight. One of the things that's interesting to me about both of your works, and I'd like for both of you to respond to this, is there are a lot of folk now who acknowledge that this is one of the great civil rights challenges that we're faced with. There are a lot of people who talk about it. We've seen stories about it. Michelle Alexander has a new Jim Crow, which is one of these groundbreaking books. But Nas, both in your work from the very beginning, and Professor Davis, in your work from the very beginning, you were both talking about prison systems and their impact on certain communities. And so I just wanted to start off, how do you see the issue now? As someone who's been talking about it in their music for 20 plus years, someone who has been at the front lines as a revolutionary activist. By the way, we're here tonight with arguably the greatest activist of the 20th century. But I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about the long arc of your career. You both, again, have been engaged in these issues through what you do for a long time. How do you see some of this stuff now?
Can we have Nas begin? Because his arc is somewhat shorter than mine.
First of all, it's an honor to be sitting here with you because you're my hero. Hear me? Yeah, so we grew up in a war, and we just grew up knowing that we had a limited time to get it all. For some reason, we feel like, whether it was whatever the hustle was, you had to get it right now. I don't know what it was, but all of us, since we were kids, felt like it was on. It was a war on, and it was. No one really told us what the war. We would hear little pieces of stuff like, watch out for this and stay away, don't talk to strangers, and when you go to school, don't. But there was something more out there that was eating at us, and that was just haunting us. And we didn't. And then slowly we started seeing how the cop cars would drive by slower and slower, and then we see it and focusing on us. And we were young, but they still were focused on us in a way that something like, what's going on. So, and then we see like the dope fiends nodding off. I'm a little older, so this was the 80s. It a lot of dope fiends, people coming from the war, the 70s and stuff like that, and then heroin had the streets tore up. So people was leaning, and I'm watching dope fiends leaning. I'm like, what happened to them? And I'm like, I'm in school, and between me and the teacher, I'm like, what's going on with me and this lady? You know what I'm saying? And I'm just starting to feel like there's a war. And then as you grow older, you start seeing your man's older brother get locked up. What the cops want him for? And you start noticing more and more, and you start to notice your neighborhood. You start to notice the situation most of your neighbors are in. Then you start to notice the trap. And then you realize, am I going to sink or swim? Am I going to be broke or am I going to eat? And you go after it. But it seems like whether you dabble into the street life or not, if you live there, you're just as guilty. you know what I'm saying, as the one you're standing next to. And then the one you're standing next to, if he's had a worse life than yours, like some of my friends' parents was on dope or whatever, and if they had a worse life than yours, and they were more anxious to go and feed themselves out there, right? So, and that meant they were in a more dangerous lifestyle than me, and that might have meant they didn't like me because I had a little better. So now I have to realize who's my friend and who's not my friend. So now the war becomes a different level. Now it's not just the cops, or it's not even the cops yet, it's my boys. And then it's the cops. So now as soon as you open your doorknob, damn, am I going too long?
No one's going to interrupt you, brother. but listen, you're listing out a lot of institutions. You had school, you had criminal justice system, you talk about neighborhoods, but one of the important pieces that we want to talk about is the drug piece. So, I mean, the war on drugs obviously is directly connected to mass incarceration, but can you give us the kind of how you saw it as a young man? You know, the war on drugs piece, and people ended up more often than not in the prison system.
Well, I saw my friends' fathers accept hustling as an occupation rather than going to work. Maybe they were skilled, but they were only allowed to go so high in the workplace in the 80s. I don't know what it was, but I saw some of my friends' fathers doing their thing. And then I was like, damn, their father's doing it? And I'm like, that's cool. I thought that. I'm like, so you can hang out as long as you want? Like, Mom, I can't hang out like all night. And, but I'm getting the real love, and he's getting a broken household love. He's not really getting the love that he deserved that I'm getting. So I'm wanting the freedom that he has, but he wants the stability that I have. And then we have this thing going on. So, but, you couldn't escape it. For some reason, there was a large amount of drugs in poor neighborhoods. There's a large amount of guns in the neighborhood. And it's almost like you can't avoid getting in this trap. So even if you're not all the way in it and your boys are in it and you guys are standing on one corner, the cops, you are a crew. So what are you going to do? Avoid your boys? You're going to be the weirdo? You're not going to hang out with the boys? You're going to hang with the boys, and you have to deal with the same stuff that they're dealing with. And, it was rough. It was really rough for me seeing my friends' families torn apart by drugs. And then therefore, later on, then they wound up in jail. And one by one, all my crews wound up in jail. And so that's how the prison thing affected me.
Sure. Professor Davis, you had a chance to see the prison system become the prison industrial complex, really on the front lines of it through your activism. So again, I wonder if you could share with how the long arc of your career, how you see the issue now.
Well, first of all, let me say that it's a real honor to be here with you, too. Because I understand that it's through culture that most people develop politically and develop their consciousness. And so thank you, for your work over the 20 years, the last 20 years. Now, it seems as if I've been addressing issues of imprisonment, the prison industrial complex, practically all of my life. I never would have predicted that this was going to be the case, but my first contact with the issue of imprisonment came as a result of working to free political prisoners. And this was back in the 1960s. Working to free political prisoners in places like South Africa, Nelson Mandela, of course, working to free the Puerto Rican political prisoners, Lolita Lebron and Nestor Corrazo. And then, of course, working to free the many political prisoners who were members of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, George Jackson and the Soledad brothers. I was a young young assistant professor, politically active. I got hired to teach at UCLA. I got fired before I was able to teach my first class because I was a member of the Communist Party. And then, as a result of all of the publicity that focused on my case, I became aware of what was going on in California prisons. Because prisoners wrote me, because they read the newspaper. And I got a letter from George Jackson. I got a letter from Rochelle McGee. I didn't realize it at the time because I got so many hundreds and hundreds of letters from prisoners. But one day I saw a picture of George Jackson, Fleeta Drumgo, and John Clichet. They were called the Soledad brothers. They had been charged with killing a guard in Soledad prison. And I saw them draped in chains. And it became apparent to me that I had to get involved in that case. I was defending my right to teach, but it occurred to me that all I had to lose was a job, right? And they stood to lose their lives because they were charged with capital offenses. So I became involved in organizing to free the Soledad brothers. And some of you may know the story, that it's too long to tell, but I'll tell you that eventually I ended up charged with 3 capital crimes and ended up going to jail. And it was when I was in jail that I realized that the whole prison issue was so much more than political prisoners. Largely thanks to George Jackson and others who were writing then about the political function of the prison, the racist function of the prison. And so when I was in jail, I published a book that I edited with Bettina Aptica called If They Come in the Morning. And the title of that book was taken from a letter that James Baldwin wrote to me. Because he had said, if they come for you in the morning, they will be coming for us that night. And so that book was an attempt to bring together the issue of political prisoners, but also people who were in prison simply because of racism. George had been in prison for 10 years on a $70 robbery. My co-defendant there, Rochelle McGee, he's still in prison. And he just observed the 50th anniversary of his imprisonment. And so over the years, I mean, it's interesting, you talk about the 80s and what was happening, and we were watching, it was the Reagan-Bush era, and we were watching educational institutions dismantle. We were watching welfare dismantle. We were watching the beginning of the deindustrialization and plant shutdowns. Like, look at Bethlehem Steel, right? Look at Detroit. Detroit is a ghost town now. And we were watching the shift in the economy, which led to corporations moving to countries where labor was not organized, where they could therefore find cheap labor forces.
Part of the reason why Nazis, people's parents couldn't find
Exactly, exactly. So I was actually thinking about that connection. And here we are today with the consequences of all of that. I can say that when I first got involved in prison work, you have to excuse me, I stayed in New York too long and I got cold. So I may cough periodically. My voice is not up to par. But I can remember at one point saying, there are 200,000 people in prison in this country. And that seemed like a huge number of people. As a matter of fact, right now, there are 200,000 people in prison in India.
Right.
In India, which is interesting because there are almost 3 billion people in India, and they have 200,000 people behind bars. And I remember thinking, how can we incarcerate so many people? And I was one of them for a while. But now, of course, over 2 million. So, yeah.
I wonder if you could each talk a little bit about, and we'll start with you, Nas, about, because there are a lot of students here who read the George Jackson narrative about the Soledad Brothers. There are a lot of students here who, through different courses, interact with incarcerated folks. And so I wonder if you could talk a little about what's the significance or what's the value or the importance of people on the outside communicating with people on the inside.
Bulletproof love. we keep it a million. You know, a jail can't, you know, you don't die there. You know, like if we friends out here, we're friends there. I still have a lot of friends in jail, and I can't talk to all of them, but I know their families. You know, can't count how many people I've put their families in hotels so they could be in town, whatever town it was that their child was at. It was a friend of mine, so they could attend the trials and stuff. So if you got to keep it a family, it's a family forever. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't matter what the situation is. You know, it's never going to break that bond.
And you know, I remember when it was really hard to encourage people to talk about what was happening in prison. Somehow, the assumption was, well, if people are behind bars, they must have done something really bad. And that criminalization prevented us from even acknowledging our kinship with people who are on the inside. There is so much talent there.
Most people are not in jail or in prison for violent crimes.
No, absolutely not. And the people who are, we might do better to try to figure out what causes people to do such things, as opposed to just throwing them away. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, as you talked earlier on about you kind of grew up with this idea that you had a short time frame to get. This is one of the things that Professor Davis is talking about. We're trying to ask the question as to why people are there. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What was in that era that made young people feel like our lifespan is short? If we don't get where we have to get right now, it's not going to happen.
We hear the older people talking, and we hear how they talk about it, and we just listening, trying to hear what grown people talk about, and they talk about the real stuff, and they think we ain't listening. And we had to listen to the scary truth, and it makes you look at your parents like, wow, like you weathered all that, and you put food on the table. It's real, like that. I gotta figure it out before I get older. You know, I gotta figure this thing out because I want more. I don't want to live here when I'm an adult. I don't want my kids somewhere else. I want more.
Professor Davis, in your work a lot, you talk about abolition democracy, and one of the things I think that gets lost sometimes in the conversation is that we would love to abolish prisons, but that's only one step, right? In your work, you talk a lot about the institutions that would have to replace the prison system. So I wonder if each of you could talk about if we could just wave a magic wand and say, okay, no more prisons. What are the institutions that need to be in place, or what institutions need to be enhanced in order to deal with the challenges that we're using the prison system to deal with right now?
Well, see, as I see it, the abolition of prisons is the creation of schools. It is the creation of a much better. same way that that W.E.B. Du Bois, for example, talked about slavery. And this is where the term abolition democracy comes from. That slavery, we were under the impression that slavery was abolished. And the point that he makes in Black Reconstruction, which is a book that everybody in this country should read, is that the only way to truly abolish slavery would have been to create democratic institutions that would have allowed for the incorporation of people who were former slaves, not into the prevailing democracy, but into a totally new democracy. And of course, that never happened. So we're dealing with the consequences of that today. So the creation of those institutions is still on the agenda.
And education would be number one for me.
Education being up there for me too. I dropped out of high school, and I never wanted to. You know, I just got bored, and I just got caught up. And but I do know, I know how important that is. It's like in New York alone, there's like 46,000 youth are arrested every year, like at the age 16, 17. And there are some works being done for these kids, but not a lot. There'd probably be like one school that I heard of where they school like 500 kids that get out. But most of them wind up getting caught up in the system. And they arrest them first as a misdemeanor charge, and they get locked up. And they're locked up for a minute, and they have a fight and brought down to court for a felony charge. And you got dudes growing up in jail, locked up from young ages. They charging them like an adult. And then with the drug thing, we're giving outrageous time for drug charges. It's crazy, like murder time for drug charges. So that, they're doing it all wrong. There's a different way to handle this thing. And if they really can, they would.
It's so tragic that the schools that we have, especially in communities of color, especially poor communities, they're not even about educating people. They're all about discipline and testing. About learning how to love, acquiring knowledge, learning how to find joy in learning. I was fortunate because both my parents were teachers. Both my parents grew up in very impoverished conditions and would not have gone to college had not it been for the assistance of people in their communities. My father was a church, my mother was the high school principal. But they taught us how to love learning. All of my siblings and I learned how to read by the time we were 3. And it just became something that was so beautiful. And why is it that now things like this are treated as a task? Something that you have to discipline people like they're in prison already. So that what happens is that the education, everybody's heard of the school to prison pipeline, the education becomes preparatory education for the discipline of jails and prisons, of juvenile halls and jails and prisons. And that is what is the real shame in the society today.
We have to get ready to open this up soon, but
Already?
yeah, I would love to just have us talk here, but we want people to engage, yes. Now, a lot of people would say that hip-hop is at least partially responsible for glorifying prisons. And I just wonder how you respond to the people. There are people who think that hip hop glorifies the behavior that gets people in prison and also glorifies prison itself.
On my first album, there's a song I did called One Love, and it's like about what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's about jail, basically. It's letters to my friends in jail. And that song is just reality. It's not about glorifying writing a letter to my boy whose girl left him. And it's hard.
Yeah, that's
a
right.
hard life. And that's what I'm doing in the song. And I think the rap music, if there wasn't rap in jails, it was jails than rap. And actually, rap is part of the product born through what the system was doing to the people. There was nothing left. So they talked about it. They put a beat together and they rapped and they talked and they're telling the story. I would not know what's going on in certain states around our nation if it wasn't for some of these street rappers talking to glorifying prison. You know, before, you know, if I'm talking to someone, say in Australia, they ask me, how is California? I tell them, they had a book about California. I said, put that down and listen to Dr. Dre and Snoop, because they're going to tell you what streets not to be caught slipping down. We're honest. And sometimes we get caught up in it. Sometimes we get caught up in the lifestyle. Sometimes we feel like, you know, it could be over tomorrow. So we're singing it like it's not going to break me. If jail is all you got for me, it's not going to break me. You know, we're singing like strength into ourselves. But unfortunately, it's so good that the radio plays it and the kids love it. And some people get the messages mixed up. And even the rappers sometimes get caught up in the image because it feels good. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, you just got to know what to, you got to tell your kids what to listen to and not to listen to. We got to be better parents, straight up.
Before we open up, I wonder if each of you could share with us a little bit about how we can inspire people, raise awareness around these issues. What are things that we can do as a community, that individuals can do to help? I mean, obviously you do it through your art regularly, you do it through your activism regularly, you know what I mean? But how do people who don't have the talents that you have come to terms with and engage some of these issues to try to raise awareness and do something about some of these challenges? We can start.
Well, you were talking before about creating more traffic between communication between prisons and the so-called free world. And years ago, we were organizing a conference, and we created a Go to Prison Week. So we said, everybody should go to prison. Not get arrested, but go to prison to visit someone, go to prison to offer your services, you know, whatever talents you have, you can teach a class or spend time with people in prison. And it was actually quite exciting. And another thing I think we need to do is be critical of the way we internalize ideas about people in prison. Because we criminalize people who are in prison by the way we imagine them as criminals. And this, the prison industrial complex could not exist without that effort, without that kind of complicity on our part. So we have to question ourselves. And I would say that people who do prison work should be careful not to reinstitute the same hierarchies that they think they're trying to contest. Students, institutions like this encourage you to be elitist. They encourage you to think that you're better than those who don't have the money. Knowledge is used in so many places, including in prison. And so know that if you're going to work with people in prison, it should be bi-directional. It should be, you should learn, and you can learn as much from people in prison than they from you. And I was just thinking about a conference I participated in recently in New York, and we called up Mumia on the stage, and we put him on a loudspeaker so that he could speak to all the people who were gathered there, who were at St. John the Divine Church, but also people who have never had the opportunity to speak to someone in a prison were able to get a sense of the repressive context within which those conversations take place. Every couple of minutes you get interrupted by someone who says that you are speaking to a prisoner in the, you know you're speaking to a prisoner. You know, and it's there to remind you, who holds the power and who doesn't. So I think that is something we can do all the time. Break down those hierarchies.
Anything to add?
I agree 100%. Going to visit and talking to them and bring a plan, a business plan, and also bring a business plan to the hood and business model and have them give them examples and bring them people who are skilled in business to talk to. I gotta go to my hood, I gotta bring them and say, look, I need all the kids, we're gonna go over here, and we're gonna talk about how to become businessmen, we're gonna set up each one of you to be businessmen, and we're gonna give you a plan. And also I'm talking to my friend Skip Gates at Harvard University about bringing more artists like myself and athletes and stuff, because we mess up money. And y'all hear about it, y'all know. So I want to put a class together for us, and he's down, and have us all learn financial literacy, because this is America. It's about getting some bread. So, we definitely need to get the power financially, because if not, we're going to do it the wrong way.
And can I just say one more thing? Because the overwhelming majority of people in prison here and all over the world are men, we often assume that it's only a men's issue. But the fact is that women constitute the fastest growing sector of the imprisoned population. And also, when you visit a prison, who do you see? Who are the ones who are visiting people in prison? And so there are multiple ways in which women are directly affected by the prison industrial complex. And also, given the fact that, this is getting into another issue, but I'll just throw it out there, that women are the targets of the most consistent form of violence in the world. So when we're talking about these kinds of institutional expressions of violence in prison and in the streets and police violence and so forth, we also have to take into consideration what's happening in relationships, what's happening in the home. Because we often forget that the family can often be a haven for some of the worst kinds of violence against women and against children. So we have to deal with those issues together, because otherwise it's not going to work.
standing by the mics, and they're there to make sure that you are going to be concise, that you actually ask a question. And we really would like to try to get through as many of these as possible.
Thanks again for you guys for coming out tonight. I have a question regarding remedies to the prison system. A lot of people justify prisons by saying that redemption is the reason why you need to have prisons. And I was wondering, how do you speak to a person who feels like an eye for an eye is the best way to solve our problems?
Okay, well, to a certain extent, we all feel that way. And we just have to realize it. And we have been made to feel that way. And I often like to point out that we're often completely unconscious of the way the state insinuates itself into our own emotional life. And so we have to struggle there. Sometimes I can remember a very, very close friend of mine was killed. And her killer was on trial. And I had to work with myself because emotionally, my feeling was that he deserves to die. But if we have this kind of retributive justice system, all we're doing is reproducing the violence. And so, if we didn't learn anything else from Nelson Mandela, we should have learned about the possibility of healing, a healing justice.
We're on this side.
Hi, I'm Joe, a senior civil engineering major. About a year ago, I was assigned reading Ballad of Negro History by Langston Hughes. One of the figures that really taught me about it was Josephine Baker, who could have had a larger impact on the civil rights movement after Martin Luther King died, but she kind of chose not to be a bigger part of it because she had 12 kids. And so one question I asked you two as mere humans, how do you prioritize, balance, rectify the intense amount of work that you have as an activist with your family life, friends, and relationships?
How do you balance it all now?
It's just, for me, it's just natural. I don't try and do it, I just do it. If you care, then you do something about what you care about or who you care about. That doesn't cut into my time. I don't like just to ride out alone. I like to see my friends and I want to see them around. I want to see them doing well. I'm not happy unless everyone that I care about is happy. And from that immediate circle, it goes out to when I hear about something and I think that I can, help. I just try to help out. I don't think of it in terms of the music here, the other stuff, the business here, and then helping out over here. It's all together or nothing.
Obviously, it takes its toll sometimes.
Yeah, it does. And, I can tell you that when I first got out of jail, years ago, before most of you were born, I said, okay, people are asking me to speak and do this, and, I'll do this for like 3 or 4 years, and then we'll die down. So I've never even imagined myself speaking to audiences like this for most of my life, but I totally agree with Nas. You can't see it as something entirely separate. It's like the way I've learned how to live my life. And I also realized that I have to make time for family and friends. I have to engage in self-care. I have to make sure that my body and my mind are clear. And, meditation and yoga and exercise and all that. Being conscious of, we were talking about this early on, being conscious of the capitalist food industry that makes us sick. That are supposedly serving our needs for nutrition. So all of this is connected. And this is how feminism has really helped me. Learning how to put things together that normally you wouldn't think of together. To me, feminism is methodological. So it's something that everybody can use. And so what it does is it makes me, as I was saying to the group earlier, that we can make contradictions productive. And we realize it. We have to see the public and the private together. We have to see the personal and the political and the institutional and the intimate.
Hi, my name is Ariana Almeda. I'm from Liberty High School. I would like to thank you for coming out this evening. And the group I came with is wondering, what is the one public policy you would change or implement to improve social justice in the United States?
One policy. If you can change one policy.
Drug laws.
One in particular, mandatory minimums,
Any, all.
I would make education free.
So my question is this. So we're talking about mass incarceration, and we're kind of only talking about part of the story here. We only talk about mass incarceration because we know roughly 95% of people who go to prison come out. So can you just shed some light for the audience about reentry, prisoner reentry? And I know Nas talks about some of his albums, the boys come as soon as they get home. And I know you work with this too, Dr. Davis. So you just maybe talk about those collateral consequences and why people go back at the rate of 2/3 and things like that. Just hear thoughts on that.
I kind of think we touched on that too. Great question. I think Ms. Davis talked on it, what needs to be done by the end. They need to know about something, they can come home to. They need to know there's a world there waiting for them. There's love waiting for them. There's some plans waiting for them. That they don't have to just come back and try to figure their way back into the situation they left. You know what I'm saying? So if we can just cut if we can stop them from going, that's great. But if they're in there and if we can get to them while they're in there with a plan, I think that would help out a lot.
And also, I don't know whether you have a ban the box campaign here. Do you have a ban the box? Abolish the box? Do you know what the box is? Do you know what the box is? You don't know what the box is?
Yes.
Okay, when you apply to this university, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Okay. Right now, at NYU and Columbia University, they have this great campaign going to they call it abolish the box on the application. the organization of former felons, only of former felons. They have come up with an amazing campaign that has been, to a certain extent, successful in California. So in California now, state government agencies cannot ask that question. They can ask it later on, unfortunately. But when you fill out the application, the box has been eliminated. So the collateral consequences have to do with the fact that when people get out of prison, they're still in prison as far as
I'm Jacob from Liberty High School. I just want to thank you for your time.
I'm so happy our high school students are here.
I just want to know how you feel about the influence the new rap era in Chicago has on black crime.
What is that? Say it one more time.
I just want to know how you feel about the influence the new rap era in Chicago has on black crime.
The rap lyrics?
No, the rap era has on the influence. Yes.
Like new rap has on violence.
I mean, you know, Chicago is one of my favorite places to go. And so when you see the rappers coming out there and
Is that a Chief Keef question?
there's a few rappers there, there's a few. It's really like saying, you know, making us aware of what's happening. Because we kind of, if we read a little bit, we can find out the violence is out of control in Chicago, but the news report, Anderson Cooper's cool, but Chief Keef will really tell you what's really happening in Chicago and make you ask this question in front of all of these people. If it wasn't for them putting their life on the line, as crazy as it may be, it's honestly them. And they're saying to the world, this is what's going on. What y'all gonna do about it? Help? If not, shut up. But it's a real time there, and it makes me think about the president because, you know, that's the crib for him. So, you know, I think he's not to put it on him. I know he's got the whole country to worry about, but I mean, I look towards rappers to tell me what's happening, what's going on in Chicago. If it wasn't for them, I could be caught slipping walking through Chicago. They're telling me what's really happening, so we need answers. So I want them to continue to tell America and the world what's happening through their music.
We're on this side.
How you doing? My name's Ashton. I'm a senior here at Lehigh. I wrote my question down so I didn't forget what I was saying. You both talked earlier about the criminalization of young black and brown people. Currently in the education system, as you mentioned, there's more emphasis on the discipline than there is in education. Kids now feel inferior because of the so-called achievement gap. Now, you had a song back when I was a real little kid. It was a great song. It was on the radio, and it was a positive thing in rap in an era where there wasn't so much positivity. So, like, I just give you kudos for that.
Thank you.
So anyway, next year I'm going to be a teacher back at home in Ohio. Because I just wanted to bounce some light. I just wanted to see what kind of advice or ideas you guys had in order for me to instill some confidence in my future students. So like they kind of, you know, the Chief Keef question really bears home to me because I'm going to be teaching kids that listen to nothing but Chief Keef. And while I really might be telling the stories of the streets, you know, I want my kids to go to college. I want my kids to end up in a place like Lehigh.
Well, congrats on the teaching gig. talk to them about Chief Keef and what he is, because we have to really be smart. We have to really, like, come on, like, really, a rap song is really going to just do all of that to us. Like, we really have to be smarter. There's lyrics out there that's going to call women out their name. Women, y'all know y'all ain't them names. Y'all know y'all bad. The radio plays the songs all the time. It used to come on late night. It used to be just, it used to not play it at all when it was NWA back in the day. We'd have to buy it on our own and enjoy it on our own, and it wouldn't be on the radio all day long. Now even the R&B dudes and stuff. So now it's a little crazy. I'm not hating, it's a little crazy because the radio is trying to keep the listeners and the kids dictate what's hot. So they got to cater to when they used to have more control. The control is gone. So now you're going to hear all kinds of music all day long, all the time. So we have to be smarter on, you have to teach your kids, you guys got to be smart. You got common sense, you know you can't be duped. You know, you can't go to jail. You don't need a gun. You don't need to ride around with no license high. You don't need to do this. We saw it in the news. You know how to use your brain. You've got to use your brain, be smart about this. And you got to remind them, it's a decision to make. You got to be smart.
Yeah, I want to add that I am so glad that you decided to become a teacher. But you're also going to have to learn how to protect yourself. And so I would suggest that you try to find like-minded people. You need a community. You can't do this by yourself. You need a community. And I was going to tell you that, what grade are you going to teach?
I'm going to teach for America program. So
Teach for America.
Middle school.
So it'll be middle school, okay. That's good, because that's where you can really begin to change kids' minds. And my sister has an organization in Oakland. It's called Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. And they work in the schools, middle schools and high schools. And what they do is first they teach the teachers to use non-punitive methods of addressing conflict. Because the teachers don't realize that they are in many ways encouraging the violence among the students because they're using violence to deal with the students. And so they teach the teachers to use non-punitive methods of discipline. And then they teach the kids how to resolve their differences by talking, by doing circles. And it's amazing. In the schools where they work, the violence has completely disappeared. Completely disappeared. When the kids have a problem, they say, come on, we need a circle. And my sister was just telling me, we spoke together in New York together, in New York a couple of days ago. And she was saying that at one of the schools, one of the kids who had graduated came back, and she said, what are you doing here? You graduated. Well, I have some issues, and I need a circle. I need a healing circle. And it's so amazing that that is possible within such a short period of time. And, you know, the Oakland School District has adopted restorative justice now as a policy district-wide. So you might also get in touch with people who are doing that kind of work, because that makes for a very different kind of learning. And good luck.
Try to squeeze in a couple more questions.
Hi, my name is Aiden. I'm a sophomore here at Lehigh. Thank you both for coming out. So recently, a open letter from an inmate who is on death row and it gets rounds on the internet. And he kind of brings up a lot of issues about, why so many people, especially blacks, end up in the jail system. And one of the claims that he makes is that there is a loss of identity. And he kind of says that black youth shouldn't really identify as Americans. And personally, I found that, I'm just curious what you guys have to say, how you feel this and
We talked about this earlier today about how, when you were younger, you didn't really claim America, but then as you got a little bit more expansive sense of things, that's changed. But that sounds like a related question.
Yeah, so rather I thought America didn't claim me. I hear you, man. It's interesting that you found that letter. That's heavy. If he wrote a letter about, he's on death row, he's got a lot. I guess he got a lot to say. So he's trying to get it all out, and he's angry for sure. And he's angry at the system, and probably rightfully so. I don't know his case. I don't know what's going on, but a lot of people feel that way because of what they experience daily. They don't want to feel that way. They don't want to say we shouldn't call ourselves Americans because they know the contributions that blacks have made, to help build our country. You know what I'm saying? So when they have to say something like we shouldn't be considered American, that's like someone changing their last name because they hate their father. It's like I'm tired of this and I want to remove myself from what hates me and doesn't want me there. That comes from a real place, that comes from real experiences that a lot of people share. So when they say that, they're not just being brats, they're not just being, complaining. They've been through a lot. And they've been through so much where they don't know what else to do. And if that will get some attention, maybe they can start some healing. When America says, well, what's wrong? Why don't you want to be an American? You are an American. Tell me I'm an American. Embrace it. Get me out of this situation.
And I'm going to say that, sometimes I have problems identifying. Well, first of all, the term America, to me, means a whole hemisphere. So, I'm American, but then in Cuba, they're my sisters and brothers. In Brazil, they're my sisters and brothers. And then I think this term African American also makes us colonized. This whole part of, why are we the only ones who get to call ourselves African Americans? There are people of African descent all over the hemisphere. Okay, and then there's another point, and that is that why do you have to have papers in order to be a citizen? So I'm going to talk about America in terms of those it excludes. And sometimes undocumented people in this country, to me, are better and more passionate and more dedicated citizens. So this is where feminism is important, because I totally agree with you now, but then I complicate it.
Answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Blossom, and I go to Northampton Community College. I was told by my Black experience teacher that without being asked a question for him, but I'm going to ask a question for myself. Close relative, dear relative of ours, my husband's son, got caught up in the 3-strike law thing up in California. And it's not that he killed anybody, did anything terrible or anything like that. But I just want to know, do you think there's ever going to be anything done to help to change that law?
In California?
Yes.
Yes. And we have been challenging 3 strikes ever since it was instituted. Ever since there was a situation in which this brother who had gone to prison on marijuana charge, and then there was something else, minor like that, and then he stole a slice of pizza and ended up getting life in prison. Because those were 3 strikes. 3 strikes and you're out. 3 strikes and you spend the rest of your life behind bars. And that's connected to the mandatory minimums and the Rockefeller drug laws. So, there are quite a number of organizations in California that are involved in the campaign to dismantle that whole 3 strikes. And we're not going to stop until we do. We're not going to stop.
You think that'll be in the future or like down the road some years?
This is an important moment. A lot of things are starting to break right now. And I think this is really the time when we can get those laws off the books. Judges in California now are, in many cases, refusing to rely on 3 strikes. So there is a lot of resistance, not just among people in prison and their families and the activists. And we have to realize that the situation has gotten so bad that even the conservatives, even people like Newt Gingrich, and we have to use them, but at the same time realize that our project is not their project. Because he's opposed to mass incarceration because it is the largest government project, right? And he's for small government. And what we say is we need the funds that are being put into this incarceration project to be used for education and to be used for government. Rehabilitation programs on the outside, in the so-called free world, so that people don't have to get themselves arrested in order to get into a drug program, which happens more times than you would think.
Unfortunately, folks, our last question is going to be right here on this side. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Dr. Imani Oberke. I'm the Africana Studies postdoctoral fellow. As a person who studies the relationship between media and society, I find it really difficult to say that when people of color are actors or athletes or artists, that a song is just a song or a role is just a role. And so I wonder if as African Americans or even people of color, if we're in a social position to really see stuff as just an isolated kind of artistic expression, or given the state that we're in, do we need to look at stuff as every action needs to be held accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. Beautiful thought. It's about her future. And it's about her knowing that this whole world is hers and she deserves it all. And when as a fan of rap music myself, I love rap music. And to me, when I say rap music, when I think of rap music, I don't think of derogatory words, violence. That's that's a big section of rap music. In my car, I listen to Public Enemy. So I have a 4-year-old son, and he listens to Public Enemy. And he doesn't know about all the other stuff that's going on yet. I keep it from him because he shouldn't know. He's 4 years old. He got 4-year-old things to do. So I protect him, and that's about all we can do at the moment. Because for some reason, these guys feel like they have to say what they have to say, and for some reason, it's the only thing they play. It's the only thing that's rewarded. It's that kind. And that's part of the problem, is that no one knows how to really put a light on rap music without, it's confusion. It's not like they know what's the high-end art of it, and they don't know the difference between that and the biggest, most street hit. And they don't know how to place them. And so when you turn on the TV, you're going to see the most street hit because it's money, for that TV show or that radio station. And no regard for our little ones. And I rap, you know what I'm saying? I make some of these records where I use crazy words. But if I don't want it played I'm different though. Like, I don't want my joints on the radio where I'm talking crazy. It's not for the radio. I didn't get into rap music when it was as large as it is now. It was our secret. It was our little ghetto secret. And I love the way rap is now. I love the way rap is now. But I liked it. I like it when it's like, I just don't think it should be played all the time. Maybe I'm old, man, but I just don't think it should be played on the radio station the whole family listens to during school hours. It should be, or as a parent, we have to turn the station to Miles Davis. We have to turn the channel because it's up to us. And it's up to us to have the conversations with our kids. It's up to us to give them the books that they need that the schools are not going to give them. It's up to us to teach them, let them watch programs that's going to encourage them and teach them more about who they are, real Americans. You know what I'm saying? They need to know that from us. And yeah, it's going to be a fight, but that life is a struggle. And we have to fight against anything that's tearing our homes apart, whether it's rap, whether it's movies, whether it's video games, whether it's fast food, whatever it is. Us as parents, if we know the difference, we have to fight.
Oftentimes we assume that that music, that they exist in some realm that has nothing to do with our everyday lives, and we would not be alive if we did not have music. If we did not have art. I kind of waver. First of all, I think it's really important to go back and remember that that the blues, Amen. Jazz, Amen. R&B, rock and roll, all of these musical genres experience something like what rap is confronting. It was, your morals are going to be destroyed. And now you're talking about, go back to listen to Miles. Well, there was a time when jazz was, it was like the music of the devil. Exactly. So I think we should recognize how important that aesthetic dimension is for our lives. And I love music. I love all different kinds of music, and I'm not as much of a lover of rap as Nas is. I listen to it. I listen to your music. And you know, sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm studying this like an academic because it's not the music I grew up with. We have a bodily relationship to music. We hear certain kinds of music and our body just moves, right? And if you're a bit older, you have to be more conscious about that with hip hop, right? If you're going to join, but I always say that those of us who are older owe it to ourselves to find ways to enjoy that music, because this is one of the ways in which generations get separated. Because we listen to very different kind of music, and we know that that rap has gotten so much, hip hop has gotten so much from blues and from jazz and from R&B. So why can't we make the effort, to try to learn something? And I think this is an important period. There are a lot of interesting developments and a lot of different kinds of music. I think, jazz is my music because when I grew up, we used to dance to jazz. I went to high school in New York, and I remember hearing MJQ and Miles and Coltrane. I mean, we would go to parties when I was 15 years old. And we would just play John Coltrane and sit around. And we didn't need any weed then. But if you look at jazz, contemporary young jazz musicians, they're doing amazing work, political work too. So, I mean, I like, like Robert Glasper. Yeah, works with collaboration is really important because it will also bring us together. And if change is going to happen in this country, that change has to be enabled by, assisted by the music that we enjoy. And I would say one final thing, and is that we have to learn how to critically listen to music. Literacy is not just about learning how to read and write. It's about understanding the impact that music has on our lives. It's about understanding the power of the image. And sometimes it's about being able to enjoy something and then ask yourself, why am I enjoying that? Listen to the way they're talking about women. And sometimes we have to both enjoy it and be critical at the same time.